The battle had ended only hours ago, yet the scent of smoke still hung heavy in the air. The human base stood on the edge of the war zone, a collection of steel walls, guard towers, and supply tents. The ground outside was scattered with fragments of weapons and armor, and deep scorch marks cut across the dirt. It was a place that told the story of what had happened without a single word being spoken. Inside the main repair bay, Tom worked alone at his bench. He was a field mechanic, not a soldier, but battles always found their way to him. His job was simple: keep the machines, weapons, and gear working so that others could fight another day. His hands moved with steady precision as he tightened the last bolts on a damaged combat drone. The sound of his tools echoed against the metal walls, the only noise in the room. He wiped his forehead and reached for the next work order. It was unusual. Armor repairs for a Saravan soldier. The name at the top read Rena. Tom raised an eyebrow. The Saravans were alien warriors, tall and reptilian in appearance, known for their proud traditions and advanced technology. Until, recently, they had been on the opposite side of the battlefield. Now, after months of tense negotiations, humans and Saravans had signed a pact to fight together against a greater threat. Even so, trust between the two sides was thin. Tom's curiosity got the better of him. He carried the order toward the far side of the bay where a section had been set aside for Allied soldiers. There, sitting on a reinforced chair, was the Saravan warrior herself. Rena was unlike anyone Tom had ever seen. She was tall, easily a head and a half above him even while sitting. Her armor was a sleek mix of silver and dark green plates, each segment etched with sharp, flowing lines. Scorch marks ran across the surface, and a deep dent on her left shoulder showed where something heavy had struck her. Her helmet rested on the floor beside her, revealing her scaled face. Her eyes were bright amber, watching him with an unreadable expression. Tom hesitated at the edge of the space. "You're Rena?" he asked carefully. "Yes," she replied in a calm voice. "You are the human mechanic?" "That's right," he said, stepping closer. "I'm here to fix your armor. The request said it's stuck?" She inclined her head. "The locking system on the chest plate is damaged. Your medics cannot treat my shoulder wound until it is removed. Saravan armor is not made for human tools, but they said you might manage." Tom studied the armor. He could already tell it was more advanced than anything humans used. The locking mechanism was hidden under overlapping plates, almost seamless. "I'll give it my best shot," he said. "Might take some time." Rena's gaze did not waver. "Time is acceptable. I will remain still." Tom set down his toolbox beside her chair. As he began to examine the plates, he could feel the weight of her eyes following his every move. He had worked on many kinds of equipment, but never on something that was still being worn by its owner. It was strange, like fixing a machine and speaking to it at the same time. The room was quiet except for the occasional clink of his tools. Outside, faint sounds of activity drifted in. Footsteps, distant voices, and the hum of a passing hover. Transport. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but it was sharp. Tom could sense that Rena was measuring him, as if trying to decide what kind of human he was. "You fight?" she asked suddenly. "No," Tom replied without looking up. "I keep the fighters alive by fixing what keeps them safe." "A support role," she said. "In Saravan culture, that is a place of honor." Tom glanced at her. "In human culture, it's important too. But we don't always see it as honorable. Some think the only bravery is on the battlefield." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thought. "Bravery has many shapes," she said. "Some hold the line with a weapon. Others hold the line with their skill." Tom gave a small smile. "That's a good way to put it." He focused again on the armor. The main locking plate was jammed. He slid a thin probe into the seam, working it gently until he felt a hidden latch shift. The mechanism made a faint click, but the plate did not open. He tried again from a different angle, careful not to force it and cause more damage. Rena's breathing was steady, but Tom could see the tension in her posture. The Saravan were known to be protective of their armor. It was more than protection. It was part of their identity. Allowing someone else to tamper with it was rare. Allowing a human to do it was nearly unheard of. He decided to speak again, partly to ease the moment. "You've been fighting alongside humans for long." "This is my second campaign," she said. "Before that, I fought against your people in 2 others. That caught Tom's attention. "And now we're allies." "Yes," she said simply. "The universe changes." He could hear the weight in her voice. For a moment he wondered how strange this must feel for her, sitting in a human base, letting a human repair her armor. But then he realized it was strange for him too. Only months ago, a Saravan soldier like her would have been his enemy. At last, he found the problem. A piece of metal inside the mechanism had bent out of shape, locking the parts together. He carefully adjusted it back into place, the motion slow and deliberate. The armor gave a soft hiss as pressure released. "There we go," he said quietly. "One step closer to getting this off." Rena's eyes followed his hands. "You work." "With patience," she observed. "Most would try to break the plate free." Tom chuckled lightly. "Breaking it would make my job harder. I'd rather take my time." She gave the faintest nod. "That is wise." The air between them seemed to shift. The earlier caution in her gaze was still there, but it had softened. Tom could feel it, even if she did not say anything more. The silence returned, but now it felt different. Less like a barrier and more like a quiet understanding. He reached for another tool, ready to start on the next section. The damage was worse here, and he would need to dismantle several layers before reaching the inner locks. Still, he felt confident. This was his work, his craft, and he intended to see it done right. Outside, the wind carried faint traces of ash from the battlefield. Inside, under the dim lights of the repair bay, a human and a Saravan sat only a few feet apart. 2 people from worlds that had once clashed, now brought together by the simple act of fixing armor. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew that this was more than just a repair job. It was the start of something that neither battle nor peace treaties could easily define. The rain had begun to fall outside the base. It pattered softly against the roof of the repair bay, mixing with the faint hum of power lines and the occasional echo of voices from the corridor. Tom continued to work on Rena's armor, his tools spread neatly across the bench beside them. Each click, twist, and soft scrape was met with the same patient focus. Rena had not moved much since they began, but her gaze never wandered far from him. Her amber eyes were sharp, yet there was something thoughtful behind them. She sat tall, in the reinforced chair, hands resting on her knees, her damaged armor plates reflecting the dim light of the room. Tom had worked on human armor for years, but this was different. The Saravan design was layered with overlapping segments, each piece connected to hidden systems beneath. It was like repairing a puzzle that could move and breathe. "You have a steady hand," Rena said after a while. "Comes with the job," Tom replied. "You can't rush repairs, especially when someone's life depends on it." "In my people's language, there is a word," she said. "It means one who guards through skill. It is used for those who make weapons, armor, and ships. They are honored the same as warriors." Tom glanced at her briefly. "I like that. Humans don't always see it that way. Sometimes people think we're just the ones in the back." Her head tilted slightly, her scaled brow furrowing. "Without you, there would be no front line to hold." There was no pride in her tone, only a calm statement of fact. Tom could tell she meant it. He turned back to the armor. The next section was tricky. 2 locking clasps hidden under the chest plate. They were jammed, likely from a plasma strike. He leaned closer, using a slim prying tool to feel along the seam. As he worked, Rena spoke again. When I first heard a human would work on my armor, I refused. Tom's hands paused for a second. Why? You were enemies. Trust is not given quickly among my people. Armor is part of the warrior. To allow another to touch it is to allow them to touch our honor. He gave a small nod, returning to his task. So what made you agree? She was quiet for a moment before answering. The medics said you were the only one who could do it without destroying the armor. I do not waste resources, and... Her voice lowered slightly. If we are to fight together, trust must begin somewhere. Tom worked in silence for a few more moments, considering her words. Then he said, I guess we're both taking a chance today. She did not respond right away, but he caught the faint curve of her mouth, a small, almost hidden smile. The tool finally caught the damaged clasp, and with a careful twist, he felt it shift. A faint hiss escaped as a seal released. 1 down, 1 to go. He adjusted his angle, his hands brushing lightly against the inner layer of her armor. The material was smooth and warm from her body heat. Rena remained still, though her gaze seemed to sharpen. Your tools are small for this work, she said. Human gear, Tom replied. Not designed for Seravan armor, but it gets the job done. I just have to work slower. You do not seem to mind. I don't, he said simply. Sometimes slow work is the good kind. He found the second clasp, but it was lodged deeper than the first. He pushed the tool in carefully, feeling for the release catch. His fingers pressed lightly along the edge, searching for the right point to apply pressure. Rena's voice broke the quiet again. You have repaired many things in your life? A lot, Tom said. Drones, weapons, vehicles, armor, anything that comes back from the field broken, I try to make it whole again. That is fitting, she said. How so? In war, most things are broken. Few can make them whole again. That is a rare skill, Tom chuckled lightly. Guess I've never thought of it like that. I just fix what's in front of me. The clasp gave a faint metallic snap, releasing at last. The chest plate loosened slightly, the overlapping armor shifting under its own weight. There we go, he said. You'll be free of this section soon. Rena nodded once. You have my thanks. Tom began easing the plate free, lifting. It just enough to see the damage underneath. The inner components were scorched, wires melted together. This was no simple repair. These parts would need replacing entirely. I'll need to take out a few more pieces to get to the worst of it, he said. Might take a while longer. That is acceptable, she replied. I am in no hurry. Tom resumed his work. He could feel the tension in the air changing again. It wasn't hostility, but it wasn't full comfort either. It was something in between, a careful balance of respect, caution, and curiosity. At one point, his hand slipped slightly, brushing against a seam in the underlayer near her side. He pulled back quickly. Sorry. Didn't mean to. Rena's head tilted. It is nothing. But there was a faint shift in her posture, almost as if she were holding back some reaction. Tom returned to work, though he was aware of her watching, him more closely now. The rain outside had grown heavier, drumming steadily against the roof. The sound filled the spaces between their words. The rest of the repair bay was empty, leaving them alone in their small circle of shared focus. When he finally loosened another section of armor, a cool draft from the bay's ventilation brushed against the exposed inner layer. Rena shifted, slightly in her seat, her scales catching the light. You work as if the armor were your own, she observed. Guess I always do, Tom said. Doesn't matter who it belongs to. If I'm fixing it, I treat it like it's mine. She studied him for a moment. Perhaps that is why they said you were the best for this. Tom shook his head with a small smile. Or maybe I was just the only one willing to try. Her amber eyes locked on his. Both can be true. He didn't answer, focusing instead on adjusting the final inner seal. As the mechanism released with a soft click, Tom realized something. This wasn't just about fixing armor anymore. The work itself was simple enough for a skilled mechanic, but the real task was in the trust forming between them. For Rena, letting him touch her armor was more than allowing a repair. It was an opening in a wall that her people rarely lowered. For Tom, it was the first time he had been this close to someone his people had once fought against. He didn't know where this would lead, but as he set his tools aside and prepared to move to the next step, he understood one thing. This was no ordinary job. It was the start of something that neither of them had planned for. The storm outside had passed, leaving the air in the repair bay still and heavy. Water dripped from the edges of the roof, tapping softly against the metal walkway just outside the open side door. The scent of rain mixed with the faint smell of machine oil and scorched plating from the armor lying in pieces around Tom's workspace. Tom had been working on Rena's armor for over an hour now. Several plates were already set neatly aside on a nearby table. Each one was marked with battle scars, deep cuts, burn marks, and dents. The inner sections of the armor, however, were far more delicate. Thin wires and energy conduits ran between flexible segments, almost like living veins. If he damaged these, the armor would be useless until the Saravans could replace the parts from their own supplies. Rena sat patiently in the reinforced chair. Without the outer armor covering her chest and shoulders, Tom could see more of the underlayer, a dark, flexible material that hugged her form. It was strange for him. He was used to human armor with its bulky inner padding and visible straps. The Saravan design was far sleeker, almost seamless. "This next part is going to be tricky," Tom said, kneeling to get a better angle at the armor joint near her side. "The wiring is tangled, and some of it is melted together. I'll need to pull it apart before I can replace the connectors." "Do what you must," Rena replied, her voice steady. He switched tools, choosing a pair of fine-tipped cutters. Slowly, he slid the tool between two melted strands and began separating them. His left hand steadied the section while his right worked with careful precision. As he leaned closer, his fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the underlayer. It was warmer than he expected, and smoother, almost like finely polished metal. Rena shifted slightly in her seat but did not speak. He continued working, carefully freeing each wire. The space was tight, forcing him to rest one hand against her side for balance while the other manipulated the cutters. He kept his focus on the work, but he couldn't help noticing the faint rise and fall of her breathing. Then it happened. As his fingertips adjusted their grip, they grazed a small ridge along the armor's inner edge. The reaction was immediate, a short, soft sound from Rena, almost like a suppressed laugh. Her shoulders lifted slightly, and her tail, resting near the floor behind the chair, gave a faint flick. Tom froze. Did I hurt you?" Rena's head turned toward him, and for the first time since they met, her eyes carried a spark of amusement. "No, that Tickles, human." He blinked, caught off guard. He had expected the proud warrior to respond with cold seriousness, not with humor. "Oh, sorry. I wasn't trying to—" "It is not an offense," she said, the corner of her mouth lifting in what he guessed was a Saravan smile. "I simply did not expect it." Tom felt a bit of heat in his face but returned to work. "I'll try to avoid that spot." "Do not," she said, surprising him again. "It is harmless. Continue your work." He nodded, though he couldn't help feeling slightly more aware of every movement now. His fingers brushed past the same spot again, and once more he heard that low, almost playful sound from her. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his own voice carrying a faint laugh. "Am I?" she asked, tilting her. Head, yes, he replied, trying to keep his attention on the wires. I've never had a client laugh while I'm trying to fix their gear. In my culture, she said, laughter during work is a sign of comfort. It means you have earned a place where no tension is needed. That's actually pretty. Nice, Tom said, pausing for a moment to adjust his tools. Humans could probably learn from that. She studied him as he worked. Perhaps we could learn from each other. The moment had shifted the atmosphere between them. The earlier formality was gone, replaced by a subtle warmth. Tom felt it in the way she spoke, and Rena seemed to feel it in the way he no longer hesitated to work close to her. He finished freeing the last melted wire and set the cutters aside. There. All separated. Now I'll fit the new connectors. From his toolbox, he retrieved a small packet of silver-colored connectors, each no bigger than a fingernail. They clicked into place one by one, his fingers moving with steady precision. Rena watched without interrupting, her eyes following each motion. You have repaired faster than I expected, she said. Experience, he replied. And maybe the fact that you didn't try to stab me when I accidentally tickled you. Her mouth curved again, the Saravan equivalent of a grin. If I had wished to strike you, you would not have seen it coming. Tom raised an eyebrow. Good to know. I'll try to stay on your good side. You are already there, she said simply. The words caught him off guard more than the laughter had. He didn't respond right away, instead focusing on tightening the last connection. Once the wiring was secure, he began reattaching the inner plates. Each piece slid back into place with a satisfying click. The armor was starting to look whole again, though there were still more sections to repair. When he finished the current section, he leaned back and stretched his hands. All right. That part's done. How's the shoulder feel now? She rolled, her arm slightly, testing the movement. Better. The pressure is less. You have done well. Still a lot to do, Tom said, glancing at the remaining damage. I have time, she replied, and I do not mind this work now. He smiled faintly. Because I'm good at repairs or because I make you laugh? Both, she said, her tone calm, but her eyes bright. For the first time since they met, Tom felt the tension between them was gone completely. They were no longer just a human mechanic and an alien warrior. They were two people sharing a moment in the quiet of a repair bay, connected by trust, respect, and an unexpected bit of humor. As he prepared his tools for the next stage, Tom realized something. Sometimes the smallest, most human moments could bridge the widest distances. And somewhere deep inside, he suspected Rena knew it too. Tom kept working slowly, his hands moving with steady care as he loosened the next section of the armor. The room was quiet except for the sound of his small tools tapping and clicking against the hard material. Rena sat still, watching him work. Her eyes were a strange shade between gold and green, catching the light each time she blinked. There was no sign of the earlier tension from their first meeting. He noticed the damaged section near her shoulder. It looked like it had taken a heavy blast. The edges were bent inward, making it harder to remove without scratching her scales. Tom leaned closer, adjusting his grip. This part is tricky, he said softly. If I pull too fast, it might hurt you. I know, Rena replied. Her voice was calmer than before. Take your time. I trust your hands. The words surprised him. Hours ago, she barely seemed to want him near her armor. Now she spoke like she had known him for longer than a day. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept his focus on the armor, sliding a tool under the bent metal. The piece shifted slowly, giving him enough space to work. As he worked, he could feel Rena's gaze on him. It was not the same sharp, guarded stare from earlier. This one seemed softer, almost curious. He wondered what she was thinking. Was she watching his skill? Or was she simply trying to understand the way humans Worked? You fix things often? She asked after a moment. Every day, Tom said. Machines, armor, ships. Anything that breaks, I try to make it work again. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's a fight. Rena tilted her head slightly. It is not just your hands that work. Your eyes move carefully. Your breathing changes when you focus. You think about the thing you are fixing, not about yourself. That is rare. Tom gave a small smile. I guess I never thought about it like that. I just try to do the job right. The armor clicked again as another section came free. Rena's posture relaxed more. She was no longer sitting stiffly like a soldier on guard. She rested her arms loosely at her sides, letting him work without interruption. After a few more minutes, Tom reached for the final locking plate on her side. The movement brought him close enough to notice faint patterns along her neck scales. They were not random. They looked like deliberate markings, maybe part of her culture. Rena noticed his glance. Those are clan marks, she said. They tell where I come from. They look important, Tom replied. They are, she said with a small nod. They are given only once, at the start of a warrior's life. He thought about that for a moment. So, letting me take apart your armor must be a big deal then. It is more than that, she said. Armor is not only protection. It is a piece of a warrior's spirit. If it is damaged, we repair it, ourselves or let someone we honor do it. That is why I watched you so closely before. I was not sure if you could be trusted. Tom slowed his work, taking in the weight of her words. And now? Now, she said with a faint smile. You have not given me a reason to doubt you, he chuckled. That's good to hear. The final plate gave a soft pop as it loosened. Tom lifted it away, revealing the last of the underlayer beneath. The armor, once locked and rigid, now lay in pieces on the nearby table. You're free from it now, Tom said. The medics will be able to help you better. Rena stood slowly, her tall frame casting a long shadow across the table. She looked at the armor pieces for a long moment before turning back to him. She raised her right hand and touched her left shoulder with it, then lowered it again. What's that mean? Tom asked. It is our way of saying thank you with honor, she said. You have shown care, patience, and respect. That is rare between our peoples. Tom felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not just pride from finishing a hard repair job. It was the sense that he had crossed a line most humans never even approached. He had earned the trust of someone who had fought on the other side not so long ago. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet was no longer heavy or awkward. It felt like the calm after a storm, when both sides understand there is no need for weapons. You know, Tom said at last, if you ever need armor work again, I'm around. Rena's eyes narrowed slightly in amusement. If I ever need armor work again, human, I will find you. They both shared a short laugh. It was not loud, but it carried a kind of lightness neither had felt earlier that day. Tom gathered his tools and began to put them away. The work was done, but something had changed between them. The alliance between humans and Saravans was still young. There was still mistrust, still distance between the two species. But in this small corner of the medical bay, a different kind of connection had begun to grow, one built not on orders or treaties, but on patience, skill, and the quiet understanding that sometimes trust starts with something as simple as fixing a piece of armor. Rena picked up one of the lighter armor plates and studied it. This will be repaired, she said, but it will always carry the mark of today. I will remember who helped remove it. Tom met her gaze. And I'll remember the warrior who let me. When she left the room, her steps were steady, and her shoulders no longer carried the same weight. Tom watched her go, then looked down at the empty armor frame on the table. For a human mechanic, it had been just another repair at first. Now, It felt like the beginning of something far more important. The rain had stopped completely now. The air inside the repair bay was cool and still, and the smell of oil and scorched metal had settled into the walls. Outside, the base was quieter than usual. Most soldiers were resting after the long battle, while patrols kept watch on the perimeter. Inside this room, only 2 people remained at work. Tom adjusted the light above the workbench so it shone over the next damaged section of Rena's armor. He had already repaired the inner wiring along her side and replaced several damaged plates. Now he needed to fix the shoulder lock so the medics could treat her injury. "This one might hurt a little," he said, inspecting the twisted hinge and burnt connectors. "The lock is jammed close to the wound. I'll try to work around it, but I may need to apply pressure." Rena's head tilted slightly. "Do what you must. I have endured worse." Tom nodded. He opened his tool kit and picked a slim, angled tool designed for tight spaces. Carefully, he worked the tip into the narrow gap between the shoulder plate and the underlayer. The mechanism resisted him at first, but he eased it open bit by bit. The damage was worse than he thought. The heat from a plasma strike had fused the hinge in 2 places, and a shard of metal had bent inward. To fix it without removing the whole plate, he would have to work extremely close to her skin. "You'll need to hold still for this," he said. "If I slip, it might scratch you." "I will not move," she replied simply. He steadied himself and began. His left hand braced the edge of the plate while his right maneuvered the tool. The space was so tight that his fingers rested lightly against the underlayer near her collar. Her scales were warm through the flexible material, and the steady rhythm of her breathing made his hand rise and fall slightly. He worked with precision, but the angle forced him to make small, careful adjustments. As he did, his fingertips brushed a ridge along the edge of the underlayer. He remembered what had happened earlier when she laughed and half expected her to react again. Sure enough, a low sound escaped her, short and soft, almost like a chuckle. "Again," she said in a voice that carried quiet amusement. "That same place." Tom smiled faintly without looking up. "Still ticklish?" "Yes," she said, the word almost playful. "It is unexpected for me." "Well, I'll try not to make you laugh too much," he said, though his tone made it clear he didn't entirely mind. "You may," she said calmly. "It does not offend me." He shook his head slightly, focusing again on the hinge. The fused metal was stubborn, but he worked it free little by little. Each movement required care, and every few seconds his fingers brushed against that same spot. Rena's breathing would hitch just slightly, and Tom could hear the faintest sound of her holding back another laugh. "You're not making this easy," he said without looking up. "In battle, an enemy might try to distract you," she replied. "Perhaps this is my way of testing your focus." He glanced at her briefly. "And how am I doing?" "You have not failed yet," she said. Finally, the bent shard of metal came free. Tom set it aside and began loosening the second fused point. This one was even more delicate, and he worked slower, feeling for the thin line where the metal gave way. Rena remained still, her eyes fixed on him. When the second bond finally released, the hinge shifted with a faint click. The shoulder plate loosened, freeing the lock that had kept it pressed so tightly. "There," he said, leaning back slightly. "You should be able to move that shoulder a little easier now." She rolled her arm carefully, testing the range. "Better," she said. "You have skill, human." Tom began reassembling the section, checking each connector to make sure it would hold. As he worked, he noticed that Rena's gaze had softened. The sharpness was still there. He doubted she ever truly lost it, but now there was a quiet respect in her eyes. "You have touched my armor more than any other not of my people," she said. "I'm guessing that's not a common thing," Tom replied. "It is not," she said. "Among the Seravan, our armor is part of who we are." To let another touch it is to share a piece of ourselves. To let someone repair it while we wear it. That is rare. Tom paused in his work, meeting her gaze. So why me? She did not answer immediately. Her eyes studied his face for a long moment. Because you work as if the armor were your own. You respect it, and you do not rush even when the task is slow. That's just how I do my job, Tom said with a shrug. It is more than that, she replied. You show care without needing to be told. That is why. Tom didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't used to hearing such direct respect from someone he barely knew, especially from someone who not long ago would have been on the opposite side of the battlefield. He finished tightening the last connector and stepped back. That's the worst of it done. The rest is mostly surface repairs. Rena inclined her head in a small nod. Then I will remain here until it is complete. He returned to his toolbox and began preparing the final replacement plates. As he worked, he realized the quiet between them felt different now. It wasn't the tense silence of strangers, but the comfortable pause of people who had learned something about each other. When he returned to her side, she spoke again. You said earlier you are not a fighter, yet you have spent much time near battle. Yeah, Tom said. I go where I'm needed. The front lines, the safe zones, wherever the gear comes back broken. I guess I fight in my own way. That is a truth my people understand, she said. A war is not won by warriors alone. For a moment, neither spoke. The sounds of the base outside drifted in. The distant hum of engines, the faint call of a soldier, the clatter of tools in another room. Inside the repair bay, they remained in their small space of work and quiet understanding. Tom began fitting the last piece into place. Rena's gaze stayed on him, her eyes bright with something that might have been curiosity, or perhaps something deeper. Whatever it was, Tom knew this moment would stay with him long after the repairs were done. The sun was setting behind the distant hills, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The base was quieter now, with most soldiers resting after another long day. In the repair bay, Tom finished cleaning his tools and organized them neatly. He looked around and saw that Rena was already there, standing near the exit, fully armored and ready. She turned toward him, her amber eyes steady. The armor feels strong. Your work has given me new confidence. Tom smiled. I'm glad to hear that. It was important to me that you feel safe. Rena nodded. You have done more than fix armor, human. You have helped build trust. Tom paused, thinking about how far they had come since the day he first began repairing her armor. Back then, they were strangers, bound by the fragile hope of peace. Now, they stood as allies, connected by something deeper than strategy or orders. Tomorrow, Rena said, we face a new challenge together. Our forces will advance to reclaim lost territory. I will wear this armor into battle. Tom felt a mix of pride and worry. You'll be safe. That armor will protect you. She smiled softly. Protection is important, but so is trust. I trust you, Tom. He felt warmth in his chest. And I trust you, Rena. For a moment, silence filled the room, comfortable and full of meaning. Then Rena stepped closer and extended her hand. Will you come with us? Tom blinked in surprise. With you? To battle? Not to fight, she said gently, but to keep the armor working, to make sure others can return home safe. He looked at her hand and then into her eyes. This was more than a job now. It was a chance to be part of something bigger than himself. He took her hand. I will. The grip was firm and sure. In that simple touch, both understood the promise of their new bond. The next morning, the base buzzed with preparation. Soldiers checked weapons, engines roared to life, and commanders gave final orders. Tom worked alongside the mechanics and medics, ready to support the troops. Rena arrived, her armor gleaming in the sunlight. She greeted Tom with a nod. "Thank you for being here." "Always," Tom replied. The mission began, and the forces moved forward together, humans and Ceravans side by side. The battlefield was fierce, but the repaired armor held strong. Whenever Rena's suit needed adjustment, Tom was there, steady and skilled. During quiet moments, they shared stories of homes left behind, of hopes for peace, and of lessons learned from war. By the end of the campaign, the alliance had grown stronger. The trust that began in a small repair bay had spread through the ranks. Humans and Ceravans fought not as strangers, but as comrades. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Rena and Tom stood watching the horizon. "This is only the beginning," she said. Tom kept working slowly, his hands moving with steady care as he loosened the next section of the armor. The room was quiet, except for the sound of his small tools tapping and clicking against the hard material. Rena sat still, watching him work. Her eyes were a strange shade between gold and green, catching the light each time she blinked. There was no sign of the earlier tension from their first meeting. He noticed the damaged section near her shoulder. It looked like it had taken a heavy blast. The edges were bent inward, making it harder to remove without scratching her scales. Tom leaned closer, adjusting his grip. "This part is tricky," he said softly. "If I pull too fast, it might hurt you." "I know," Rena replied. Her voice was calmer than before. "Take your time. I trust your hands." The words surprised him. Hours ago, she barely seemed to want him near her armor. Now she spoke like she had known him for longer than a day. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept his focus on the armor, sliding a tool under the bent metal. The piece shifted slowly, giving him enough space to work. As he worked, he could feel Rena's gaze on him. It was not the same sharp, guarded stare from earlier. This one seemed softer, almost curious. He wondered what she was thinking. Was she watching his skill, or was she simply trying to understand the way humans worked? "You fix things often?" she asked after a moment. "Every day," Tom said. "Machines, armor, ships, anything that breaks, I try to make it work again. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's a fight." Rena tilted her head slightly. "It is not just your hands that work. Your eyes move carefully. Your breathing changes when you focus. You think about the thing you are fixing, not about yourself. That is rare." Tom gave a small smile. "I guess I never thought about it like that. I just try to do the job right." The armor clicked again as another section came free. Rena's posture relaxed more. She was no longer sitting stiffly like a soldier on guard. She rested her arms loosely at her sides, letting him work without interruption. After a few more minutes, Tom reached for the final locking plate on her side. The movement brought him close enough to notice faint patterns along her neck scales. They were not random. They looked like deliberate markings, maybe part of her culture. Rena noticed his glance. "Those are clan marks," she said. "They tell where I come from." "They look important," Tom replied. "They are," she said with a small nod. "They are given only once, at the start of a warrior's life." He thought about that for a moment. "So, letting me take apart your armor must be a big deal then." "It is more than that," she said. "Armor is not only protection. It is a piece of a warrior's spirit. If it is damaged, we repair it. Ourselves or let someone we honor do it. That is why I watched you so closely before. I was not sure if you could be trusted." Tom slowed his work, taking in the weight of her words. "And now?" "Now," she said with a faint smile. "You have not given me a reason to doubt you," he chuckled. "That's good to hear." The final plate gave a soft pop as it loosened. Tom lifted it away, revealing the last of the underlayer beneath. The armor, once locked and rigid, now lay in pieces on the nearby table. "You're free from it now," Tom said. "The medics will be able to help you better." Rena stood slowly, her tall frame casting a long shadow across the table. She looked at the armor pieces for a long moment before turning back to him. She raised her right hand and touched her left shoulder with it, then lowered it again. "What's that mean?" Tom asked. "It is our way of saying thank you with honor," she said. "You have shown care, patience, and respect. That is rare between our peoples." Tom felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was not just pride from finishing a hard repair job. It was the sense that he had crossed a line most humans never even approached. He had earned the trust of someone who had fought on the other side not so long ago. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet was no longer heavy or awkward. It felt like the calm after a storm, when both sides understand there is no need for weapons. "You know," Tom said at last, "if you ever need armor work again, I'm around." Rena's eyes narrowed slightly in amusement. "If I ever need armor work again, human, I will find you." They both shared a short laugh. It was not loud, but it carried a kind of lightness neither had felt earlier that day. Tom gathered his tools and began to put them away. The work was done, but something had changed between them. The alliance between humans and Saravans was still young. There was still mistrust, still distance between the two species. But in this small corner of the medical bay, a different kind of connection had begun to grow. One built not on orders or treaties, but on patience, skill, and the quiet understanding that sometimes trust starts with something as simple as fixing a piece of armor. Rena picked up one of the lighter armor plates and studied it. "This will be repaired," she said, "but it will always carry the mark of today. I will remember who helped remove it." Tom met her gaze. "And I'll remember the warrior who let me." When she left the room, her steps were steady, and her shoulders no longer carried the same weight. Tom watched her go, then looked down at the empty armor frame on the table. For a human mechanic, it had been just another repair at first. Now it felt like the beginning of something far more important.